All right, hello everyone. This is Renato Bonomini from ContentWise. I usually do a lot of things, and whenever people ask me, especially my family, what do you do? It's a very tough question. So I do pre-sales engineering, so most of all might be familiar. And what I would like to do today is actually interview Deep about the experience that we have had at ITVX in working in personalization. There's been a lot of discovery questions yesterday. Pretty much every panel intervention was about the problem of discovery. And I think it'll be in 10 years from now, we'll still be here about talking about the problem of discovery. There's really no solution, so it's just how do you make it better? All right, so let's start with an easy question, warm up. So how is ITVX using personalization to enhance user engagement and retention?
Thanks, Renato. Great to be here. So nice to start early in the morning with people from our industry. Maybe just start with a bit of background. So for those of you who know, we launched ITVX in December 22. It was a really intense project, and we had this idea of launching UK's freshest streaming service, so really combining the best of ITV and much more. And it was this project where we had to kind of redesign the service and make sure we really boosted content discovery, because we were going from about 1,500 hours of content to 15,000 hours of content. So really content discovery was one of our critical pieces of work that we had to do. And so we designed the service. We launched, and obviously the challenge in a project that's so short is you don't get to do everything you would like to have done and all the different aspects of it. So we had this combination of editorial curation and personalization. We didn't get to make as much progress on personalization by the time we launched for the Qatar World Cup. So subsequently in 2023, that became a big focus of ours. We also had a challenge whereby our personalization we had built on top of AWS Perso. So those of you who know that tech stack, it's kind of AWS offers these tools. But it's really hard to make progress because while the recipes were there, someone still had to cook the meal, put those recipes together, do the data science work, really figure out how to keep moving forward on those models. It took a long time to iterate on our models. So what we did in 23 was we obviously did the selection process. We chose you guys for content recommendations. We also embedded data and data science much more closely into our teams, put in place A/B testing capabilities. So fast forward to now, and more recently, in November, we started working with you and your team. And really what we've been doing is rolling out personalization to more and more parts of the experience and working on the models. So we've rolled out Recommended For You, a new algorithm for Recommended For You, which has been quite a success. We've seen an uplift in click-to-conversion, which has been really positive. And we are now starting to put in place more and more rails with personalization across our service while also working on the marketing aspect. So really being able to do content recommendations in our marketing and CRM emails as well. So that's a bit about our background, the challenge we faced, and then where we find ourselves today.
Excellent. And actually, you just lead up to a very important point, which is the measurement of success in personalization. Going back again, yesterday, there were a lot of comments about discovery and how there was a mention on how bad recommendations are. And it's one of my most favorite topics is how do you actually measure the quality of the success of personalization?
Yeah. So I think, there's I think of it in two buckets. There is the immediate kind of first order effects. So things that are more directly impacted by any kind of content recs work that you put out there. So those are metrics such as click to conversion. So click to convert to play. So if the recommended title really work for the user, they will obviously click and convert and play. The watch time on that title, the breadth of recommendations that you're serving to people, the overall kind of immediate engagement that you see as a result of that. And then there's slightly longer term metrics which take a bit longer in any kind of A/B test that you do to measure. So things like overall lift in viewing hours. So obviously, they could view a bit more of this because you're recommending it to them, but they might be taking away time from watching something else. So your net increase in overall watch time on the service may not increase. Now, those kinds of things are second-order effects that they take much longer to measure because you have to run your A/B test for much longer, and then you want to see overall, was there a lift in overall total viewing time across the entire month, across both content you recommended and other content that they found organically onto the platform, and then as well as engagement and retention. So retention for our AVOD users, because we've got the service with both AVOD and SVOD. You want to see retention increase for both AVOD and SVOD, and you want to see overall engagement increase. So those second-order effects take much longer to measure. And so I would put them into those two buckets. But a key part of all of this is, with any of the stuff, you're obviously measuring a rate. So it's trying to see the rate of change, so the percentage uplift, the percentage increase over a control and a test that you're trying to do. So your variation, so you want to see how it did against the previous situation. But then the other thing you really want to see is how it did by cohort. And I think this is the key with a lot of this stuff is engagement metrics, rate metrics really have to be studied at a cohort level, because you might actually see your engagement increases and by a certain percentage point, but for some segments it's actually doing worse than for and better for other segments. So really, what we always knew we wanted to do this, and we were ready right at the start, was to make sure we were measuring how personalization and recommendation was doing, both for lower engaged cohorts as well as for high engaged cohorts, and to see the behavioral differences between those two.
Excellent. Actually, let me ask you in the audience a question, because again, the quality of success and personalization is very personal. It's something that you feel. So there's always a balance that you need to strike between the quality of recommendations and the surprise, the serendipity effect. So if you were to pick between surprise me or show me something that I'm sure you're going to like, which kind of option would you like? So how many of you would like the surprise option? Okay, and how many of you would like, well, just show me something that I'm sure I'm going to like? Okay, that's interesting. A little bit more about show me something that you might like. So that's one for the examples of the choices that you have to make when you build an algorithm or configuration. You have to decide how much balance between the precision, how much of a machine choice, how the recall effect, how precise you are versus how much you actually surprise a person. And it's actually quite easy from a mathematical perspective to look at the more you surprise people, the less precise you are. So you always have to take a balanced approach. And one of the things that I realized working with your team has been definitely this very much a data approach. So measure everything. So the amount of measurements and the amount of data collected to make sure that we were doing the right thing has been very much a key point of the overall engagement, and that has actually been very much appreciated.
Yeah. Might be interesting also to hear from you, because you work with clients across different industries and different types of clients, just what some of your learnings have been in terms of working with us versus other industries or other clients.
Indeed, I would say, first of all, it happens very frequently that a lot of companies decide to do personalization because someone told them to. And it's very often, yes, it's a checkbox item. So I see so many RFPs coming around where, oh, we need recommendations. Okay, so what are you looking for? Oh, we need recommendations. Okay, but what are you really looking for? Recommended for you. And was that it? So very often operators just do it because they have to. So it's not much of a choice from a business perspective. And I think this is related also to what kind of business goals are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to keep your users engaged? Are you trying to make users consume more content longer? Are you going to keep them for a longer period of time? So the long-term value perspective. So I would say that especially in the case of ITVX as a company, ITVX as a service, I think it's fundamental that the whole team has been embedded with the idea of making this success. And I think actually came from previous experiences. It's not the first time that you actually go around. It's several iterations of making it successful. So I think that was a big difference. A lot of companies that just getting started, they're happy with whatever. Sometimes you might think that the customer, in this case, I don't like to call it partner, like in your case I prefer partner, but a lot of these customers, oh, great, we set it up and then forget about it, and that's usually rarely works. So I think really understanding the goal of personalization and making it a company point of view that is fundamental. All the metrics and everything really, I think they were key to actually make sure that we were doing the right thing. Obviously, on the other side, this took a lot of people. Yes, that's actually been probably a challenge. And I'm actually very glad that you put a person in charge of the whole program, which really made a difference. Because definitely, I think this goes together with the fact that a company believes in personalization. So a lot of people, we were torn apart, but several people asking for several things all at once. So I think it made a huge difference to put a person in charge of the personalization program. That really made a difference.
Yeah, great. Really interesting. Always good to get feedback and see the lessons in the industry.
Yes, good. Actually, on point, so what is the one lesson that you think it might have been counterintuitive to what most people might think of in terms of results or in terms of process?
Yeah, I think so. The interesting bit is we're all in this world, in the OTT world, for engagement and trying to engage our users and try to keep them on the service a longer period of time. So our real hypothesis going into this personalization project was that it's going to be really tough to really engage the low engaged users with whatever new algorithm we put out there. And that our high engaged users who know ITV and know ITV's content, really enjoy all our box sets, will be getting a lot out of the service. And so really it won't be very difficult to move their numbers. And the really interesting thing we saw right off the bat from one of our first A/B tests, because of this cohort thing that we knew we had to work on, we were studying all the cohorts right from the get-go, was actually quite the opposite. And that really surprised us, that actually the low engaged users, the moment you introduced better personalization or improved personalization, we saw an immediate boost to those numbers. And the high engaged cohorts we found actually were flat or even in some cases declining depending on which model you were using. And that was a real surprise to us. And we thought about it, and actually it requires a different mental model to say, actually, that now makes sense, because the lighter engaged users, if you show them content that really cuts through, so content that's popular, content that really cuts through and is titles that they really like to watch, they're much more likely to engage on that. And actually, they're landing on your service, and the first thing you want to do is recommend to them some content that they haven't thought about for coming from ITV. So those numbers lifted, and so that required a bit of a reframing on our side. And actually, for the high engaged users, where you're really trying to get to the fat tails of consumption, they've seen all your main stuff, and you want to get really into the nooks and crannies of the genres that they're interested in, or the really long tail content that they might be interested in. That's a much harder problem to solve, and actually that requires some algorithmic changes. So the nice thing working with you was we were able to, with your teams, really iterate on those models and deliver new versions of the model that did better on this problem, that did better for the high engaged users, while still making sure that our low engaged users were seeing that uplift, and being able to quickly roll out more and more iterations of that model to see how these different cohorts were behaving was really key in solving that problem. So we felt it was really counterintuitive. Low engaged users, that's got to be the hardest problem. We don't know much about them. Surely that's difficult. But to see the immediate boost on low engaged users was really nice positive for us.
And I think this goes back to the previous point, and I think you challenge us on testing different configurations and seeing, and all the metrics collected about the cohorts were fundamental in trying to actually make it better. So I think that, and going back to the previous point, definitely a change that I've seen in a lot of other operators we work with is the challenge on and the interest that your team showed in trying to make it better for everyone in general as a global overall number, but also looking at the different cohorts and understanding. I think this is a pivotal way of actually driving the overall success of the program, indeed. So what will be moving forward, what will be the next action, the next activity, the next goals that you have in mind for personalization on ITVX?
Yeah, I mean, we're just getting started. So when we designed the service, ITVX, it was very different from what we had previously. ITV Hub, we had this 15,000 hours of content catalog to really put in front of users. We came up with this concept of like shopping market aisles. So you had, the aisles that were constantly changing, but then you had, you knew where milk and eggs and bread and your regular staples were. So there were some things that were always the same for you, whether it was you always knew that your continue watching was in one place, your my list was in certain places, and then the rest could change. And so we had this nice balance, I felt, of editorialization, because we have a really good editorial team that really commissions all this content and puts it out there and merchandises it, and personalization. Going forward now, I think what we want to do is start to roll out more and more personalization while still staying true to that design and making sure more and more of our rails are algorithmically managed. So we will be rolling out more and more across the entire surface area of the app. So whether that's the home page or different pages where people go to look for content, categories, search, all these places. So we'll just keep rolling out more and more personalization to the surface area of the app. That's the first thing. I think the other thing then is also then iterating on those models, which you've been able to do, like I just mentioned, but also starting to work on other models, collaborative filtering. There's there's content to content recs, and then the industry term of algotorial. So mixing editorial content and then resorting it based on what the algorithm is saying. So your editors pick a certain set of content, and then you resort it. So all those kind of model variations we'll be working on and rolling those out. Then the other thing we want to do is we're collecting a lot of data on our platform in terms of intent from people. So what program pages are they going to? What searches are they doing? What my lists are they adding to what shows they're adding to my list? We want to be able to obviously send all that data feed in a privacy safe way. Obviously, if someone has opted into personalization, be able to send that and make those algorithms smarter. The other project that we're doing at ITV is making sure that our metadata is much better. So there's been a lot of work going on within our supply chain and our supply chain teams to make sure that we have better content tagging, better embedding, kind of understanding the vector relationship between different titles and all that. So that work's been going on in parallel, which will make the algorithms obviously a lot better. So that's the fourth thing. And then the thing that we all obviously want to work on is also starting to roll out personalization beyond the app, so beyond kind of on the service, but also off the service. So things like CRM and marketing emails, those have to also get personalized and improved. We've already done some of that, but we got a lot more to go. And then work with our distribution partners. Our distribution partners are constantly, personalizing their home screen. And often the content discovery problem that we all face as an industry is where you even start to look for content. So, when you first turn on whether it's your Sky or your Virgin box or your LG TV, your Samsung TV, is where do you start and what the recommendations. So increasingly, I think there's going to be a lot more ability within the apps to really pass signals to each other and be able to work with the distributors on personalizing your home screens. We already do it in a way with things like continue watching, but there'll be other things like that we'll do. So we'll increase the surface area. So those are kind of the 5 big themes and areas we'll keep working on. Obviously, long term, and you just heard the panel that was before us, which is where does Gen AI take us? Where do foundational models take us? That's a bigger change. Obviously, that requires a lot more thought with your IP and being able to share your IP. So that, I think, will be a longer term thing that goes on in the background as to what foundational models do to all of this.
Definitely. And again, on the comparison among other companies, I have to admit that I was definitely impressed by the level of quality. Starting from the video team, I think that was...
the video team's up there, by the way, some of them.
Yes.
And Steve over here, yeah.
So definitely, we were expecting, because of the selection process, we knew what we were going to face, and that was a pleasant surprise. But I think actually the biggest surprise was looking at the off-platform point of view, the marketing team, the reach out, which was much more mature than other companies. So for you operators out there, if you want to take a look at an example of how things should be done, I would definitely look at what ITV is doing off-platform from that point of view, from a personalization perspective. Definitely a lot more maturity that I've seen in a lot of other operators. That is definitely the case. So before we open up to questions, I would like actually to leave with one key takeaway. So what is the one or multiple, I'll let you pick, takeaway from this overall experience?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have one. Maybe I think too much in PowerPoint bullet points, 3 or 5. I'll try to kind of summarize the main takeaways. I think the first thing is making sure you think of your vendors as kind of force multipliers. Too often within our companies, as we get kind of really fixated on trying to do all of this ourselves. And I think we learned that when we used AWS Perso as our platform. Yep, you can make progress. There's a bunch of recipes, but you need a product that's productized with a bunch of different levers, a UI interface, the ability to iterate fast. So I think that was really important, thinking of these kind of vendors as, force multipliers for what we want to do. I think the second thing is, when you try to do some of these things, you got to boil it down to its kernel. So you have a lot of stakeholders, you have a lot of people that want different things, but what is the kernel of what you're trying to do? And to your earlier point, lots of people at ITV, it's a very collaborative culture. We work very closely with all our different stakeholders or partners. But the kernel of what we were trying to do was content recommendations. And once we got that right, then we moved much faster, because there's lots you can do within personalization. It's a huge space, AI, machine learning, personalization. So I think that's really important. The third thing then is, obviously, even if you have that kernel, you still need to bring all your stakeholders with you, but try to avoid the committee-based decisions. So that, I think, was another key learning for us. And then really a big part of all of this success has been really embedding data within our team. So we have data analysts embedded within our product teams. We put in place improved kind of data collection. We have a data mesh or data platform at ITV. It feeds into a product insights tool with A/B testing capabilities. So our product managers were already doing A/B tests, had thought of A/B tests. We're looking at their data. We're looking at conversion rates. So that I think is really important, having that data embedded culture within your company. And I think that the last thing I would say is being able to move fast and iterate. So you need to find this balance of allowing the teams to move fast and iterate without too much governance, but then still, obviously, still having some constraints like, hey, you need to use the data stack, or you need to put all the content recs back into the data platform so that other teams, other stakeholder groups can use it in other ways. So trying to find that balance where the team has the ability to run fast and make its own decisions while still adhering to your overall architecture or your overall goals as a company. That's a really hard thing. I think in most companies, I've done this job kind of a couple of times before. You can get it right or wrong in either of those balances. Either you try to be very top down and that really makes it hard for the teams to iterate and move fast, or you really empower the team and the team thinks that they can make all the decisions, but you're not overarching looking at an overall architecture or what you're trying to do at an overall system level. So you're optimizing for the local maxima, but you're not optimizing for the system. So finding that balance, I think, has been key. So it's been a great learning for all of us. I think we've enjoyed the journey.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we'll open up to questions.
Yeah, well, loads of questions.
Let you pick.
I was going to ask one, but no.
Sure.
Yeah. Actually, while I'm handing over the microphone, there is one question. When
Please
you were writing,
do a lot of questions before we let Kauser do the questions, please.
when you were writing the RFI or the RFP for content recommendation vendors, what was sort of the top, say, 2 or 3 things that you were looking for from that specific vendor, from content recommendation vendors?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think the first thing we were looking for is to make sure that they were really good in the content rec space, because obviously that was the kernel of what we were trying to do. The second thing was a vendor that we could really iterate and work with very closely, because we figured out early on that while it seems like it's one of these things where you hand over a SaaS-based tool and you're off to the races, actually what's going to happen is we had, as I said, AWS Perso as our platform. We could iterate on that. Just we found it hard to iterate fast enough. But we bring in another vendor and they say, here's a tool, here are the keys, just go do whatever you want. And we knew it wasn't going to be like that, because we were moving from a very much in-house model to an outsource model. We are going to kind of lose a lot of control and actually still need the ability to tweak this model. What if I put that? What if I uplift films? What if I change your algo to do X, Y, Z? So we knew that it was one of these situations where we're going to have either the vendor's going to give you a SaaS tool and then charge you lots of money after the fact for kind of change requests, which was we're like, whoa, this project, we think it's going to cost us this, it's going to end up costing us way more. So we wanted a vendor with whom we could just be on Slack and talk and say, what if we tweak this, and so that real embedding was key to us on this journey. Maybe eventually we get to a model where it's truly SaaS-based, our teams are mature, our models are mature, and we're not iterating so fast. So that was, I think, probably the most important thing. And then the third thing, obviously, is you are looking for someone who understands your industry and your space, because personalization is a wide space. And I think that you really need someone who has, the creds within the media industry, because you are trying to do content recommendations within OTT and all of that. So you do want to make sure that you're not choosing something that's completely left field, and then that player has to understand everything that you're trying to live and do. So I think those were kind of 3 key things that we did.
Thanks. I'm Justin from Google Partnerships.
Yeah.
I saw some interesting studies a few years ago from both MTM and ThinkBox about need states when you're watching TV. So, for example, you come home from work, you need to relax, or you're sitting down with the family at the weekend, you need for excitement, and so forth. Have you considered those kind of research elements into your algorithms? A kind of question for both of you. Is that something that's a big trend in recommendations?
Do you want to take that first?
Yes. So usually the way to address is that there's a user, there's content, and there's context. So very often in this, it is called mood. So what are you in the mood for? So it's the only challenge will be not to make it a clippy moment. That actually could be the mistake. So what are you in the mood for? Or then it becomes, well, you should know what I'm in the mood for. So it's always a delicate balance between trying to make it so that you try to understand what the user intention is. So there are techniques that help with that. For example, session-based interest is one based on a few actions you do when you enter the platform, when you're entering, what the time is. So you can predict what the mood of the user could be, whether, for example, the user is in-network, out-of-network, mobile device, or whether a large 10-foot pole device. So there are signals that you can use to try to estimate. There is the good old approach, just tell me how you feel, and then depending on that, so you can let user browse. So I think there is a movement towards making it where it was one set of recommendations that work in every situation to more context-based. Context will actually mean it could be the time of the day, it could be the mood, it could be the device you're in, it could be the region, anything that makes the particular situation different. And again, there are techniques that help with that. Especially in advancement in machine learning with neural networks made it much easier from that point of view.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. We are doing some work, some research work actually exactly on this, on jobs to be done. So kind of functional, emotional, social jobs to be done. We've had a consumer segmentation that is kind of behavioral, attitudinal, but we understand that there are these more in the moment jobs to be done that people are hiring your TV service or your VOD service or your streaming service for, and it's around mood states. But the problem with these is they can be passing and they can be fleeting and they can be short-lived. And so how do you build a proposition or do things when someone can have multiple mood states but fit in a segment and have different needs throughout different moments in time? And then to what Renato just said, then how do you infer that? Because I might be a segment, you might think, okay, I'm a lighter user, whatever, demo, whatever. And so you serve me something, but actually I'm in the mood for something completely different and it's more based on my mood. And how do you infer those things? So I think as an industry, we'll have to keep evolving in this space and figuring out how we get those signals and what we do with it.
Yeah, hi. Working with Bright Cove's analytics over a lot of different clients, we found that a key ratio for customer retention was the amount of time spent searching for something to watch on a VOD service compared to the amount of time spent watching content. It strikes me that personalization is in a good position to reduce the amount of time spent looking for content, and I wonder what this has done to this ratio for ITV.
Yeah, it was. I think we haven't looked at that particular ratio, but what we do look at is time spent on page before you click on a piece of content, and we've seen that go down on our homepage. We improved our search a while ago in different ways, and that's another thing we found, that time spent searching and then getting to a piece of content had reduced. So while we haven't looked at that particular ratio across the entire service to say, what's the kind of time spent searching to finding content as a general ratio for our service, we do look at it on a page by page or feature by feature level, what the time spent on the homepage to convert to content is, or what the time spent on search. But yes, they have decreased, and you'd have to do different A/B tests to figure out directionally why they've decreased. Have they decreased because you've increased in certain genre, you increase your content catalog, you're recommending better, all of those things. On the homepage where we do A/B tests, we can find that to see this cohort took less time or this cohort took more time. But yeah, it's a really interesting point. I don't know.
The metric we call it time to content.
Yeah.
The important part of these metrics that they need to be contextualized. So rather than the ratio, I think it's more of a comparison among time. So you choose one strategy and you look at the time to content, you change the strategy, and it's not the absolute number. Like, what is a good number? Is it 5 seconds or 2 minutes? No, is it configuration A, it was 4 seconds, configuration B is now 3 seconds, maybe that's on the faster side, because your editorial choices are also making a huge difference.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to understand, well, if I put something that's a blockbuster on the hero banner, well, time to content will be extremely small. But do you want people to browse your catalog? Do you want people to feel like there is content? Or, hey, it's always the same 3 items, there's no variety. Well, in reality, there are a lot of items, so you actually have to extend the time to content. So there's no absolute number from my perspective. It's more to be used as a baseline to understand whether what you're doing is moving the needle or not.
Yeah, and that's a great point. When we have massive shows, or you have Love Island, you see time to conversion really decline. Literally you see, or if you have a big live football match, it is the fastest thing that people go to. They see that in the hero and they click through. So I think it's important trying to understand and infer or try to understand the causation to say, well, what is happening? Your time to click through has gone down, but is it just because there's a big title, a big football match, and therefore that's happening? Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Sorry,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
just
yeah.
quickly to dive in, I'd not heard of the term mood states, but that I think is one of the biggest issues that need to be covered. And the answer that you gave about inferring is very interesting. But is that possible? I mean, the issue that I've had, the personalization journey that's been most effective for me was with Spotify. When I first started to use Spotify, I sort of ended up in this world with a very small, the music I knew and the music I loved. And then once I had Spotify and it started to recommend stuff, it gave me, a whole new set of opportunities to listen. The problem is, of course, after a while, it thought I only wanted to listen to mournful female folk singers. And I love a mournful female folk singer, but I just don't want to listen to them all the time.
Yeah.
And that question that you were asking earlier on, Renato, about do you want to surprise me or do you want to give me the thing that I want to have? That feels like they're two completely contradictory but very necessary parts of the recommendation journey. And the response you were giving about how do we infer, that's all on the consumer side.
Yeah.
So how do you bridge that gap? How do you take that step across to be able to offer both things be all things to all men?
Yeah, sure thing.
So it's definitely related to the concept of session that we were talking earlier. So a few years back, recommendation algorithms where you collected data, you crunch numbers, you generated a model once a week, and the results were the same the whole time. And nowadays we're moving towards a situation where, like you mentioned Spotify, for example, session-based interest is the technique that they use, which your latest 3-4 actions are determining what is being shown to you. So it's no longer a process where data is collected and used once in a very long period. So it's literally a matter of seconds that what you have in front of you is adapting to your latest interaction. So that tries to follow the implicit actions you're doing and trying to estimate what's right now good for you. In the video space, for example, an interesting technique that has been used recently, when the trailers are being shown to you, there is a mood associated with every change of scene. So if you're watching a trailer, when are you taking an action? In a moment when a scene is sad, is happy, is thrilling, is exciting, or it's quiet. So that will determine the mood you're in, or probably will give you a hint. Maybe it's just a hint. Maybe it's actually the mood you're in, but it's yet another signal that we can use to imply that you might be in that state.
My 2 cents on this. I think that the real challenge is the interaction pattern of homepages, Rails, and stuff don't work for this problem. Obviously, any innovations, you hold two things that seem almost paradoxical together, and you can bring those two things together, is obviously that the innovation we'll all have to see. And that's why I think Spotify is doing AI DJ or DJ AI, is to say the interaction pattern has to be different. We have to throw something at you, and you tell DJ AI or whatever, hey, I don't like this, and skip to the next song, and then it learns something from that. So in Spotify's case, they've also decided that we have this interaction pattern of the home screen. You've got kind of audiobooks now coming in, podcasts coming in, your music playlist coming in. It's lots going on. But let's just take the music area, and within music itself, it's kind of go back to the previous model of there's this kind of radio button and you just switch channels. And so the AI DJ is a completely different interface where you can do that and say, actually, I'm not in the mood for that, give me something else. So I think we'll have to come up with completely new human-computer interfaces to be able to mix serendipity with kind of personalization. And that's going to be the innovation that we need to figure out. Yeah.
Very quick last question.
Okay, I'll make it very quick, but congratulations to both of you. I think it's quite amazing the way that you've developed ITVX. It's been fantastic. So a lot of the iterations and the developments and all of the investment that you're doing here is about retention, optimization, advocacy and engagement. But I'm just wondering, with this vast depth of data, whether you're thinking about how do you grow sort of off-platform as well? And you have alluded to it slightly, but I'm thinking, and this is off the top of my head, I'm sure there's better ways than this, but guest passes, refer a friend, can you use those cohorts? Do people who like some things, are they, do they flock together? Is the ways that you could sort of exponentially grow using the learnings that you have?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that we haven't tried a lot of stuff there. We do voucher codes and stuff for our SVOD service, so we do offer certain sales and voucher codes and stuff. But trying to do kind of network effects or social engagement to get people to your service, I don't think we've explored that on the SVOD side. On the AVOD side, that's not as much of a concern. It's more on the SVOD side where those behaviors, where there's locked content and you can get some benefits and guest passes, as you're saying. So I think it's something we can explore in the future. I think the reality of what we all face is today, as you know, as we talked about in mood states and need states, you're going to just turn on your TV and whoever your distributor is, wherever your home screen is, whether it's Samsung, LG, Virgin, Sky, and then you can say, okay, my mood state is X and I want to watch X. So bringing people back to the service is a high friction thing to bring them back into the service and remind them that someone's given them a member pass and watch it. But the reality is that people make a choice when they sit down on their sofa in the evening and they just turn on their TV and that's the first home screen. Then how do they get from that moment, here's my mood state, this is what I want to watch, oh shucks, there's 10 services, where do I even go? I think that's still the industry challenge for us as to how we get them there. I don't know, you might have seen kind of guest passes and this behavior with some of your operators.
Yes, we've been studying, for example, network effects, people that influence others, friends. There's been a going back and forth between using social media for this, so it's a challenging privacy question too. So.
Thank you, Mrinal.
Thank you.
for keeping up
Thank
the
you,
show.
everyone.
Thank you very much.